Good evening. Good to see you tonight. Every time I thought, I'll just go to sleep. I thought, what's the point? I won't be able to sleep. Might as well just wait and see what's going to happen next. About 2:30, I just got mad. Still didn't go to sleep. So I'm only saying that because I was already up and going around 5:30 this morning. So if I say something backwards or something really off the wall or crazy, it's because the little synapses here are like fried and goo. And so I'm going to do the best I can to run on adrenaline tonight. But we're in chapter 10 again. I want to call your attention to something that I find rather interesting and perhaps timely. That's right here. We read through chapter 10 at the end of our class last week. But I did want to touch on a few verses, beginning of verse 6. These are the nations as they were divided among the sons of Noah after the flood and his descendants. And the sons of Ham, beginning at verse 6, were Cush, Mizraim, Put, and Canaan. The sons of Cush were Seba, Havilah, Sabta, Raamah, and Sabteka. And the sons of Raamah were Sheba and Dedan. Cush begot Nimrod. He began to be a mighty one on the earth. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. Therefore it is said, like Nimrod, the mighty hunter before the Lord. And the beginning of his kingdom was Babel, Erech, Akkad, and Calneh in the land of Shinar. From that land he went to Assyria and built Nineveh, Rehoboth, Calah, and Rezin between Nineveh and Calah, that is, the principal city. Now, I read this again because we're rehearsing some verses that we did last week, because I want to call your attention to this man named Nimrod, and try to explore a little bit about what we may or may not be able to learn of this man. It's interesting and worth noting that of all the sons that were born and recorded in this chapter, this is the only one with such commentary associated with his name. So there is some significance attached to Nimrod. As you see, he began a great city and a kingdom in the plain of Shinar. Now, if you go to chapter 11, which I call your attention to now, the book of Genesis, we'll just read chapter 11 together. And hopefully with just that thought of Nimrod in the back of your mind, as he was simply introduced in chapter 10, I believe we'll see the one who's really kind of the ringleader here. At least if you'll follow me tonight, we'll be able to establish that. Now the whole earth had one language and one speech, and it came to pass, as they journeyed from the east, that they found a plain in the land of Shinar, and they dwelt there. They said to one another, "Come, let us make bricks and bake them thoroughly." They had brick for stone, and they had asphalt for mortar. And they said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower whose top is in the heavens. Let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be scattered abroad over the face of the whole earth." But the Lord came down to see the city and the tower which the sons of men had built. And the Lord said, "Indeed, the people are one, and they all have one language, and this is what they begin to do. Now nothing that they propose to do will be withheld from them. Come, let us go down, and there confound their language, that they may not understand one another's speech." So the Lord scattered them abroad from over the face of all the earth, and they ceased building the city. Therefore its name is called Babel, because there the Lord confused the language of all the earth, and from there the Lord scattered them abroad over the face of all the earth. This is the genealogy of Shem. Shem was 100 years old and begot Arphaxad 2 years after the flood. After he begot Arphaxad, Shem lived 500 years and begot sons and daughters. Before I continue reading, I don't know if this occurs when you're reading this to you as it does to me, but you see here that 2 years after the flood, Arphaxad was born to Shem, right? And 500 years after Arphaxad was born, Shem continued to live on planet Earth. That's a long time. That's half a millennium. So for 500 years, Abraham was born less than 300 years after the flood. So one of the individuals on the ark very likely could have met, conversed with, talked to, shared stories about the earth that then was, or what it was like on the ark. Who knows? You know that these men who lived considerable lengths of time, Noah himself, after the flood itself, were able to share their life story, what God had done, the judgment that was wrought in the world. We've often said, and rightly so, that during the patriarchal period there was no written law. But God did speak to his people. He spoke directly to the heads of the households. And also it would be the case, like, for example, with Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, that they would have been able to continue and to share the truth of what happened with the world that then was and the world that is now, and why the world changed. And the ark and all the things associated with it. Don't you find that interesting and fascinating? How even though they didn't have technology like we have, they didn't have books perhaps like we have, nevertheless information was disseminated from the actual source. So they weren't just having to read about what happened. They could actually talk to someone who experienced it and learn firsthand. I just found that interesting. Verse 12, Arphaxad lived 35 years and begat Selah. After he begat Selah, Arphaxad lived 403 years and begat sons and daughters. Selah lived 30 years and begat Eber. After he begat Eber, Selah lived 403 years and begat sons and daughters. Eber lived 34 years and begat Peleg. After he begat Peleg, Eber lived 430 years and begat sons and daughters. Peleg lived 30 years and begat Reu, and after he begat Reu, Peleg lived 209 years and begat sons and daughters. Another point I want to stop and make here, if you look at the numbers, how old these men were when the next generation was born, there's a lot of overlap in their time. So when you say he lived 400 years, and the next guy lived 400 years, and the next guy lived 400 years, a lot of those 400 years were still the same 400 years, essentially, with maybe 30, 40, 60 years differentiating between them. So, again, just keep that in mind as you think about the centuries that are listed here. They're overlapping. Peleg lived 30 years and begat Reu. After he begat Reu, Peleg 209 years and begat sons and daughters. Reu lived 32 years and begat Serug. After he begat Serug, Reu lived 207 years and begat sons and daughters. Serug lived 30 years and begat Nahor. After he begat Nahor, Serug lived 200 years and begat sons and daughters. Nahor lived 29 years and begat Terah. After he begat Terah, Nahor lived 119 years and begat sons and daughters. Have you noticed anything about the ages of these men?
Gradually less.
Gradually less and less. But again, when you think of the gradual lessening, keep in mind, 30 years old, 35 years old, 29 years old, when the next generation was born. So when you're counting 400 years, there's a lot of overlap. So that's the same 400-year block that these men are sharing. And so when you think about how, in terms of the length of time is lessening, the further away you get from the flood and from the ark, the more rapidly the age decreases. Yes, Roger?
Moses was inspired to write
Yes.
the first 5 books of the Old Testament.
Indeed, yes.
So we don't need to worry about whether they pass anything down to him, since he was inspired, yes or no.
Well, Moses was not around, period. Not at this point. He would not come around for centuries, actually. So, no, I'm speaking about Abraham and some of these others that are in this list, how information was shared before Moses gave the written law. Before a written law, men shared orally the Word of God. And it's just fascinating to me to think about these individuals who actually experienced those things, were able to share that information. Okay, verse 26, Terah lived 70 years and begat Abram, Nahor, and Haran. This is the genealogy of Terah. Terah begat Abram, Nahor, and Haran. Haran begat Lot. And Haran died before his father Terah in his native land in Ur of the Chaldeans. Then Abram and Nahor took wives. The name of Abram's wife was Sarah. The name of Nahor's wife Milcah. The name of Haran, the father of Milcah, and the father of Iscah. But Sarah was barren, she had no child. And Terah took his son Abram and his grandson Lot, the son of Haran, and his daughter-in-law Sarah, his son Abram's wife, and they went out with them from Ur of the Chaldeans to go to the land of Canaan, and they came to Haran and dwelt there. So the days of Terah were 205 years, and Terah died in Haran. All right, any thoughts or comments generally about the text? Good. I want to read with you an excerpt from Josephus. I know many of you have heard of Josephus. He's a Jewish historian who wrote really contemporary with the time the Romans were invading Jerusalem and ransacking and destroying the city of Jerusalem in 70 A.D. He was an eyewitness, in fact, to the destruction of the city of Jerusalem. So 2,000 years ago, this man wrote Jewish history. So we're going back now in time to when this was authored by Josephus, who's not a Bible writer. He's not inspired. And so what he's sharing with us are simply the words of an historian. And I don't know about you, but I like history, and I like reading history books. And some history you take with a grain of salt, and some history you know is pretty sound and based on good evidence. When it comes to Josephus, it's hard to know what's sound and good and what's not. It's not inspired. So all of it is up for debate and question, certainly. But I don't know that we should necessarily suspect or be critical of everything that he records just because he isn't inspired. There are a lot of people who can write about events, historically speaking, and get it fairly accurate. And so we don't have to just assume that he's wrong because he's not inspired. But again, I want to clarify. He's writing about this very event we just read about in chapter 11 of Genesis. And he's writing about Nimrod from the Jewish historical perspective. And I want you to understand before I read any of this that that's what it is. And I'm telling you in advance why I'm doing this. I believe this is timely. I believe it reflects what is happening in our world. I know you, if you're like me and you probably watched a little of the news last night and you heard, I'm not exaggerating much. So if you heard the way people were talking back and forth at each other, sometimes yelling at each other, insinuations and insults hurled back and forth at each other, and you hear the common refrain, we are a divided nation. How many of you would agree with that assessment? We are a divided nation. How many of you believe that? We are divided. Just raise your hand. Okay. What divides us? Now, I know you can answer that in a lot of ways, but let's just think about what divides us.
Those who believe the truth and obey it, and those who don't.
Well, okay, that's one way of saying it. But we could just say it this way. We have two completely opposed world views colliding. When I say world view, we hear that term used a lot. Let me explain what I mean. Your worldview colors everything you understand about the world. How you interact with the world, how you respond to the world. It colors the way you look at law, the way you look at government, the way you look at education, the way you look at entertainment, the way you look at family life, the way you look at, those theological issues or whether there's a heaven or a hell or a God or not. I mean, all of these things are colored based on your worldview. If you believe in God, and that you will one day answer to God, and that God has written to us His will in written form, you are in a theistic, God-centered worldview. That's one worldview. There's another worldview, which is, it's atheistic. There is no God. And we are here by ourselves. We answer to no one. We are the masters of our own fate. And we do as we please. And we take care of ourselves, etc., etc. Two completely opposed worldviews. One of those worldviews has a strict code of conduct. And that code of conduct is not based on their whims and their likes and their dislikes, or what I believe is okay, or what you think is okay, or what the majority thinks is okay. But their view of morality is based on what does God say, what has been revealed to us in Scripture. The other worldview could care less. The other worldview says, you do your thing, man, and I'll do mine. You live your life and I'll live mine. And sometimes people are caught in between these two worlds. They're stuck somewhere. They're not really here and they're not really there, but they're colored in both ways and they're conflicted and their lives are really a mess. And it strains relationships. It has a lot of harm because we don't understand who we are and what we think. And I'm saying this because this is not a new thing. This is not a new phenomenon in the world. And so when I read this excerpt from the writings of Josephus about Nimrod and the Tower of Babel, I want you to listen carefully to what's happening as Josephus 2,000 years ago was talking about things that happened thousands of years before his lifetime, as he's simply recording history as he understood it from Jewish tradition. And this is what he said. The sons of Noah were three, Shem, Japheth, and Ham, born 100 years before the deluge. These first of all descended from the mountains. He's talking now after the flood. These first of all descended from the mountains into the plains and fixed their habitation there and persuaded others who were greatly afraid of the lower grounds on account of the flood and so were very loath to come down from the higher places to venture to follow their examples. Now the plain in which they first dwelt was called Shinar. God also commanded them to send colonies abroad. Now, this is Jewish tradition. But according to Jewish tradition, God had commanded them to send colonies abroad for the thorough peopling of the earth, that they might not raise seditions among themselves, but might cultivate a great part of the earth and enjoy its fruits after a plentiful manner. But they were so ill-instructed that they did not obey God, for which reason they fell into calamities and were made sensible by experience of what sin they had been guilty. For when they flourished with a numerous youth, God admonished them again to send out colonies. But they, imagining the prosperity they enjoyed was not derived from the favor of God, but supposing that their own power was the proper cause of the plentiful condition they were in, did not obey him. Nay, they added to this their disobedience to the divine will, the suspicion that they were therefore ordered to send out separate colonies, that being divided asunder, they might the more easily be oppressed. You got to stick with me. You're thinking, what has this got to do with our world? Trust me. It's uncanny how history repeats itself. Now, it was Nimrod, he continues, who excited them to such an affront and contempt of God. He was the grandson of Ham, the son of Noah, a bold man and of great strength of hand. He persuaded them not to ascribe it to God as if it was through his means they were happy, but to believe that it was their own courage which procured that happiness. He also gradually changed the government into tyranny, seeing no other way of turning men from the fear of God, but to bring them into a constant dependence upon his power. He also said, this is written 2,000 years ago about people who lived thousands of years before. Anyway, he also said he would be revenged on God if he should have a mind to drown the world again, for that he would build a tower too high for the water to be able to reach, and that he would avenge himself on God for destroying their forefathers. Now, the multitude were very ready to follow the determination of Nimrod and to esteem it a piece of cowardice to submit to God. And they built a tower, neither sparing any pains nor being in any degree negligent about the work. And by reason of the multitude of hands employed in it, it grew very high, sooner than anyone could expect. But the thickness of it was so great, and it was so strongly built, that its great height seemed upon the view to be less than it really was. It was built of burnt brick, cemented together with mortar, made of bitumen, that it might not be liable to admit water. When God saw that they acted so madly, he did not resolve to destroy them utterly, since they were not grown wiser by the destruction of the former sinners, But he caused a tumult among them by producing in them divers languages, and causing that through the multitude of those languages they should not be able to understand one another. The place wherein they built the tower is now called Babylon, because of the confusion of that language which they readily understood before, for the Hebrews mean by the word Babel, confusion. Now this is the words of Josephus. Now he's just telling us a little more, based on Jewish tradition, about what Nimrod's real motive was and what was really taking place here. Now, the Bible doesn't say that. That's just a guess as good as anyone's. But think about it. Why is Nimrod mentioned, number one? And what's really happening in chapter 11? What is this tower all about? And what was going on here? And why did God feel the need to confound their languages? Let me ask you this question. What does it mean he was a mighty hunter before the Lord? Any clues or theories or thoughts? Were there any dinosaurs on the ark? Well, according to Brad Harab and others, there were plenty of dinosaurs on the ark. So when they got off the ark, they lived in the world like their predecessors. And like human beings, they lived long periods of time for a period of time. And so dinosaurs probably survived for a period of time. But can you imagine living in a world where dinosaurs were roaming around? It'd be kind of cool to have a big trophy room with a Brontosaurus in it and a T-Rex in it. You know, a Triceratops. You know, hey, look at me, man.
I doubt if there was that kind of
You doubt that, huh? Well, I don't know why you doubt it. Whatever God made went on the ark. I don't know why we doubt that. But anyway, maybe they weren't around when the ark was built. I don't know. Maybe they'd already been eaten. There's a lot of, well, they didn't eat meat before the flood. I don't believe.
Can I ask you, I know I've heard several times that prior to the flood, that every living thing was vegetarian.
Yeah, ate vegetables, yeah. So,
That would include the dinosaurs.
yeah, so they were still around, right? So maybe he was hunting dinosaurs, or maybe he was hunting other creatures, or maybe he was hunting people. And that's when one of the suggestions about this phrase, maybe he was a hunter of people and was able to corral people and force them into servitude, into slavery. Perhaps. He was a very powerful man, a man of great stature in the sense that he became a great one in the earth. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord, but he began to be a mighty one in the earth. You remember in Genesis 6, there were giants in the earth in those days. Men of what? Men of renown. It's almost like history's repeating itself. Those tendencies that were there before the flood are now exemplifying themselves again in this Nimrod. I'm glad we don't have anyone like Nimrod in our lifetime that we can look to and say he would like to rule the world or be in charge of all mankind. Or let me ask you this question. When you, and you probably, some of you have heard, I'm sure, this is this guy against the establishment. What is the establishment? I'm sure you could answer that in some ways, but just give me a quick general overview. What is the quote-unquote establishment? What is that?
The government where all they do is help each other and help themselves.
Okay, it's an inside group of elites. And what worldview do they have? What predominates? Well, yes. It's not theism doesn't dominate. Now, they may be theists in that group, but theism doesn't reign as their worldview. Atheism would. Humanism would be the very basis of their worldview. But have you ever heard the term one world government?
Oh, yeah.
You know, most of our presidents, going back to Roosevelt and others, wanted and have been trying to achieve a one world government. Did you realize that?
Oh, yeah.
You know, WikiLeaks has told us a lot of things that were said at certain bank groups and by certain individuals that are not president at the present time. But this particular individual that's not president at the present time said, I want open borders. I want a world without borders. I want a one world government. And you say, well, that's crazy. Where would anybody ever get an idea like that? Well, look at ask Nimrod. He had a very similar idea, it would seem, wouldn't it? Let's just have all people around the world in this big one world government. Now, what does God think about the United Nations? What does God think about a one world government? Well, let's answer that question. Genesis chapter 11. God saw man pulling together. What did God do? Why? I thought God wanted unity. Why would God do that?
Because if the one leadership is corrupt, the whole world would be corrupt.
Can you imagine? Some of my more conservative brethren would say to us, at least the argument was made in times past, in arguing against having Bible classes, for example, ordering literature from publishing houses, that one of the dangers and the pitfalls of doing that is you're going to be ordering material from this publishing house, and if they print stuff that's not right, it's not biblically sound, and you use it here, and they use it at West Jordan, they use it at Lithia Spring, they use it at Freeman, well, then everybody's poisoned by the same well. There's a good valid argument to be made there. We have to be mindful of that, don't we?
Well, we've got elders to make sure that.
We do. But what if, and there are a billion human beings, on this planet with us right now who believe that one elder rules the entire church throughout the world. So there is that concept even in religious matters. And in fact, Catholicism, that's what it means. Catholic Church, universal church. We have one church and we have one elder ruling over this whole body of believers and telling all believers what to believe. Well, what happens if the Pope gets it wrong? A billion people, if they're loyal to their elder, have gotten it wrong. But when you look at the model and the pattern in the New Testament, what do you see in those churches? Those churches were autonomous. There wasn't some diocese where several churches in a district or an area would answer to one bishop or one elder, which became common practice in the late 2nd, 3rd century, but before AD. But before that, I mean, churches were just as they are here. They were autonomous. They were self-ruled. They didn't answer to a denominational headquarter anywhere. They answered directly to King Jesus, who directed the affairs of the church through his word. And you know what? He still does. And so as we seek to be that church, that's exactly what we'll be. Again, I'm digressing here a little bit into the realm of religion, but you understand in the political arena how it could be disastrous if everybody in the world was under one world government. You know, we have many in our government now, in both parties, who want a world tax. They want us to give money to the United Nations to tax us for driving a car that burns fossil fuels. I don't know if you knew that or not, but they're trying to promote this as we speak. And so you say, well, where's that going to end? It's not going to be... Well, I know this. God confounded their languages because God didn't want... You know, in Acts chapter 17, I believe it's verse 26. Well, let's just turn and read it. Paul said something on that at the Areopagus to the Athenians as he was preaching about God. Chapter 17, and I believe it's verse 26. Let me see. Yes. He said that God has made from one blood every nation of men to dwell on all the face of the earth, had determined their pre-appointed times and the boundaries of their dwellings. That's what Josephus was saying. I mean, there's not Bible for that, but Josephus was saying, based on Jewish tradition, that God had given direction and given order that human beings should colonize, send out groups to colonize the world. And their response was, let's gather together in the plain of Shinar and let's build ourselves a big city and a big one world government, and let's all stay together so we won't be divided, because we believe there's strength in numbers, and God said, I want you to scatter abroad upon the face of the earth. So man was at odds with God, and so God had the upper hand. God said, fine, that's the way you want it, I'll confound you. So they couldn't understand each other. Kind of funny in a way. I mean, we're still struggling trying to understand each other, but that's how God dealt with it. And so we were then forced to spread abroad upon the face of the earth. And so we had those going into Asia and those going into Europe, those that came to the Americas, those in the Middle East. I mean, the world was populated as God intended for it to be, according to God's decree. I found that fascinating. I don't know about you, but that's really fact. Brother Roger?
The point of chapter 11 is to help us understand that when
Yeah, he will deal with it. Yes.
And it wasn't to get away from the flood that they were building that ark. That's not the concept in the scripture.
That's right. It was to make a name for
Now,
himself.
to make a name for themselves.
That's
Look
exactly
at us,
That's
how
right.
great we are.
That's exactly right. Exalting themselves. That's exactly right. That's what the text said.
Back then, a lot of it was about power, like it is today.
Yes. Power. Yes. Exactly what it was.
So you can see I'm king of the world, honestly.
Well, you know, you look at the pyramids, but prior to the pyramids, there were, what do they call them, ziggurats? Those triangular-shaped buildings that were erected in honor of some great ruler or whatever. Well, Nimrod just probably the first to build this great monument to himself, in essence. Building a name to himself and inviting the world to come and submit to him. Okay, I want to just pause a minute, and I want to talk to you about, because it's something that took me a while to grasp. I remember hearing the term worldview and not understanding exactly how that worked. Everybody heard the name John Dewey? You ever heard that name? What do you know about John Dewey? Educator. In fact, he's described as the father of modern education. In fact, there is in the libraries, still in many libraries, the what? Dewey Decimal System. John Dewey was a very influential man. In 1933, he, along with several other men, signed a document called the Humanist Manifesto. Now, in this Humanist Manifesto, the father of modern education, public education, okay, they put out for all the world to see their worldview. And this is how they express themselves. I'm not going to read it all. I want to read some excerpts from the Humanist Manifesto 1. This is Article 8 and 9. Just read Articles 8 and 9. Religious humanism considers the complete realization of human personality to be the end of man's life and seeks its development and fulfillment in the here and now. This is the explanation of the humanist social passion. 9. In the place of the old attitudes involved in worship and prayer, the humanist finds his religious emotions expressed in a heightened sense of personal life and in a cooperative effort to promote social well-being. Now, it doesn't sound all that exciting when I read this to you, but I want you to think about what's at the heart and soul of their worldview as they are expressing it. These are just Articles 8 and 9. I could read anything, but it's all damaging to understand where they're coming from. But these are the movers and the shakers. These are, in essence, the establishment, the elites, who are determining how we think, what we think, why we think about it, how often we think about it, what's reported in the news, what you learn at school, how we're governed. All of these things are set by these people with this worldview. Now, that was 1933. That's a while ago. My daddy was just a little boy when the humanists first came out with their declaration. But in 1973, 40 years later, they had a problem. Because you see, when they came out with the Humanist Manifesto in 1933, they honestly believed that if they could convince the world to accept their worldview, there would be an absolute end to wars. 1933. What happened after 1933? When did Hitler start marching through Europe? Was it the end of 1930s? And so by the 1940s, we were all engaged in a world war. Millions of people were exterminated. It was a horrible... In fact, the 20th century has been described, and rightly so, as the bloodiest century in human history. It's tragic, but it's almost poetic justice in a sense when you think about what the humanists in their arrogance were claiming. We can jettison God. We don't need God. We can do this ourselves. And if we get rid of God, it'll be easier to do this ourselves. We can get rid of religion, which is causing all of the wars. So we're going to promote humanism. And the more humanism was promoted in the world, the bloodier our century became. Now, 1973, I'm not going to read the opening monologue to their number 2 manifesto, but they basically said, we've had to recalculate because we've had a lot of wars, a lot of tyrants, and that was 1973. There were more wars to come. And we're still engaged in wars. But anyway, this is Article 1 of the Humanist Manifesto 2. In the best sense, they say, this is after 40 years of reflection, in the best sense, religion may inspire dedication to the highest ethical ideals. The cultivation of moral devotion and creative imagination is an expression of genuine spiritual experience and aspiration. We believe, however, that traditional, dogmatic, or authoritarian religions that place revelation, God, ritual, or creed above human needs and experience do a disservice to the human species. Any account of nature should pass the test of scientific evidence. In our judgment, the dogmas and myths of traditional religion do not do so. Even at this late date in human history, certain elementary facts based upon the critical use of scientific reason have been restated. We find insufficient evidence for belief in the existence of a supernatural. It is either meaningless or irrelevant to the question of survival and fulfillment of the human race. As non-theists, we begin with humans, not God. Nature, not deity. Nature, you remember Romans chapter 1? They replaced the creator with the anyway. Nature may indeed be broader and deeper than we now know. Any new discoveries, however, will but enlarge our knowledge of the natural. Some humanists, they continue to believe we should reinterpret traditional religions and reinvest them with meanings appropriate to the current situation. Such redefinitions, however, often perpetuate old dependencies and escapisms. They easily become obscurantists, impeding the free use of the intellect. We need instead radically new human purposes and goals. They mean by this, we need to get rid of the idea of heaven and hell. We appreciate the need to preserve the best ethical teachings and the religious traditions of humankind, many of which we share in common, but we reject those features of traditional religious morality that deny humans a full appreciation of their own potentialities and responsibilities. Traditional religions often offer solace to humans, but as often, they inhibit humans from helping themselves or experiencing their full potentialities. Such institutions, creeds, and rituals, he means by that the church, often impede the will to serve others. Too often, traditional faiths encourage dependence rather than independence, obedience rather than affirmation, fear rather than courage. More recently, they have generated concerned social action, with many signs of relevance appearing in the wake of the God is dead theologies. But we can discover no divine purpose or providence for the human species. While there is much that we do not know, humans are responsible for what we are or will become. No deity will save us. We must save ourselves. Now, could they be any clearer as to where they're coming from and to what they believe? You say, but this stuff doesn't matter. This is stuff for college people. This is stuff that's in the mainstream of thought every day of our lives. We just don't recognize it. It's wormed its way, weaved its way through every facet of our culture. And we need to be aware of what's happening and what is being taught. Now, you go back to what Josephus was saying, according to Jewish tradition, was being said by Nimrod. You don't need God. Take care of yourself. I don't find it far-fetched to believe that Nimrod would have said something like that. He's not the only one to ever say such a thing. Those who signed this Humanist Manifesto 2 said exactly that. I'll just read it again. No deity will save us. We must save ourselves. Anyway, any thoughts or comments on this?
About the election last night.
Not there yet. Let me read Article 12 and then we'll get there. Okay. And this is where I was going. I forgot. I'm tired. I didn't sleep last night. This is where I'm going with this. Okay, you got to stay with me. This is Article 12. Everything I read to you is the basis for this. And again, you've heard the term one world government. I know you've heard that. This is what they say in the Humanist Manifesto 2, Article 12. We deplore the division of humankind on nationalistic grounds. We have reached a turning point in human history, where the best option is to transcend the limits of national sovereignty and to move toward the building of a world community in which all sectors of the human family can participate. No border. You ever heard that expression? And you know who's saying it? The establishment. Thus we look to the development of a system of world law and a world order based upon transnational federal government, i.e. the UN. This would appreciate cultural pluralism and diversity, It would not exclude pride in national origins and accomplishments, nor the handling of regional problems on a regional basis. Human progress, however, can no longer be achieved by focusing on one section of the world, Western or Eastern, developed or underdeveloped. For the first time in human history, no part of humankind can be isolated from any other. Each person's future is in some way linked to all. We thus reaffirm a commitment to the building of world community, at the same time recognizing that this commits us to some hard choices. I'm not going to get into the election. I know you want me to. I'm not going to do it. I've already been up too long thinking about it. But I do want to say this only to make a point. Only to make a point. When someone runs for public office and says, I want to put America first, I'm not running to be president of the world, but president of the United States. You say, what does that mean? Why is he saying that? Well, he's almost forced to say that. Why? Because the establishment wants a world government. They want all of us to be one. What was that song they said the hippies sang back in the 60s? I want the world to be living in harmony. It was a Coke song. What was that song? I remember that as a kid. Catchy tune. But that's the John Lennon view of the world. No borders, no religion, no God, just one big happy family. We'll just kill each other and eat each other, but yeah, one big happy family. I mean, that's really where this is headed. And so when someone comes along and says, I want to be president of the United States, and people come out in groves and vote for him, you say, where did they come from? There are two world views, diametrically opposed world views. Are we a divided nation? Indeed we are. How will we ever be united as a nation of people? I know we hear, and these are distractions. These are distractions. We need to heal the racial division. Racial division is always going to be around. I mean, racial division is kind of like social division. You can have rich and poor and middle-class people, and they're always going to divide into their little groups. I mean, rich snobs don't want to hang around with someone like me. I mean, so what are we going to pass legislation to make rich people hang around me? I mean, we have differences, and they're not necessarily good or bad. They're just different. And so when you hear people say, we've got to heal the divide, it's not about race. It's about ideas. It's about worldviews. And we really need to get a grip on this. We're not going to be able to help ourselves or help other people until we understand what's happening. It explains the madness of our world. You say, well, how did we get to this point? Well, it's by design. I mean, people have been pushing for this for some time, and they're just now realizing their goals. So there's benefit in keeping people separate. And we know that because God said, I don't want you one world government ruling in the plain of Shinar. I want you to spread abroad upon the face of the earth. The humanists are now saying we want one world government. Everybody together, no differences, no separation.
Except for ISIS.
Sir?
Except for ISIS.
Except for ISIS, yeah. Well, let me bring one thing to your attention. We got about 2 minutes. There's that expression in Genesis 11. God said, let us. Who was God speaking to?
God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit.
In the starlight age of Revelation, there is clear indication that the Godhead is comprised of 3 separate individuals, all possessing the one divine nature. And God said to himself, let us go down and confound their languages. It's fascinating because you say, well, nothing would be impossible to them. What does that mean? Nothing they imagine to do will be restrained from them. Can you imagine people on the plains of Shinar building this building out of asphalt? Can you imagine them thinking that you could reach into your pocket and pull out a little device and just punch a number or speak to that device and talk to someone on the other side of our planet? Or you could punch your device, and that person's face pop up, and you could see them, and they could see you, and you could talk back and forth live, and they're in another state. I did that with my sister-in-law today, by the way. She's in Tennessee, bless her heart. And I was with Lydia, and we had the kids at the dentist office, and I said, well, let's just do a video chat and show off my grandbabies. And she's in Tennessee, and I'm in Georgia, and she's looking through this little device that fits them up. Can you imagine people thinking that you could do something like that? I'm sure at some point they would have imagined it, but you know what? Here we are. Mankind is capable of a lot of things. And it's quite amazing when you think about how fast technology is advancing. But there is also great danger in technology advancing too fast. And I believe God recognized that. And God wasn't afraid of man being any kind of competitor with him. It was more about God's concern for us perpetuating the race. If we don't slow this thing down, nothing they imagine do will be restrained from them. We can do some extraordinary things. Anyway, interesting stuff in Genesis 10 and 11, and some things perhaps that are timely that we should pay attention to ourselves. Yeah, I appreciate y'all putting up with me. And I know it's not been easy because I didn't sleep well. I didn't sleep. I didn't sleep. So I don't know if I said some crazy stuff or whatever. You're looking at me funny, so I don't know what to make of your expressions. But, huh?
We didn't sleep either.
Oh. So I'm in good company. All right. Thank you.
What got me this morning was our friend gave her statement. She conceded the race. She was trying to use the Bible as a basis for what she did.
So the devil said that Jesus had
After she had publicly said it was all right to kill babies.
Yes. She did say that in the debate. I heard her.
You're just not going to take the faith, are you?
No, sir. What number? Number 479. 479 in your songbooks, please. We want to say congratulations to the Gentrys. They have some great grand twin boys that were born to them. Was that today? Yesterday, okay. Sawyer Allen and Steele James. And we want to say congratulations again. Hope everybody is going to be happy and healthy. Certainly much to be thankful for. Ladies, don't forget your ladies' night out tomorrow night, on November the 10th. That's at O'Charlie's here in Rica. Men, please don't forget our annual planning meeting this Sunday afternoon following the afternoon service. Be discussing upcoming events, goals, and our budget for the coming years. Thanksgiving celebration. This is going to be fun and interesting. We're going to be having our first annual Thanksgiving celebration Friday the 18th, starting at 6:30 in the evening. Please bring your favorite Thanksgiving dish or dessert to share. We'll also be spending some time in devotion and prayer prior to or following the meal, yet to be determined. This ought to be a wonderful time for us to gather together and share good food and good fellowship and to express Thanksgiving. There's much for which to be thankful this year and at the conclusion of this year. Are there any other announcements we need to make? Yes?
The youth,
Yeah.
Youth Devo next week has been moved way earlier than we thought it was going to be. It's going to be at 4 at Piedmont.
Oh,
So we will be leaving here almost as soon as church is over. So we're scheduled to leave at 2:30. We'll be needing to leave around 2:45.
okay.
So any youth planning on going to that with us.
That will interfere with our men's meeting too, won't it? Okay. And there goes my excuse, Doug. We'll have to come up with something else to end that meeting quick. What's that? Yeah, you tried to tell me. I thought, man, if we got to get here by 4 o'clock, we can get this thing over. Okay. Yes, sir? Tessa's going to be 22 tomorrow. And want to say happy birthday to Tessa. And she's really growing fast. Right? I didn't sleep last night. You're fine? Okay, you can say 22. Stick with that. Okay. Any other birthdays? Roger made a good point in our Bible class tonight, based on Genesis 11. God always has the final say, and His will be done. And that's true in our lives individually, it's true in our lives collectively. But ultimately, when we think about coming to stand before God in Judgment Day, we will have to hear that final word from God. He will have the final say. And on that day, that word will be based upon what Jesus has revealed in His Word. He said as much in John chapter 12, verse 48. The question we all must ask, am I living in keeping with the revealed will of God? Am I prepared for Judgment Day based on what that Word says? If not, we pray that you will make that need known, you will make the proper changes in your life, and you will make that response known while together we stand and as we sing.
Let us pray. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for allowing us to assemble here and to no portion of our word. Pray that you forgive us sins, take what we've studied and apply it to our lives. God, guard and keep us next morning time. Thank you. Amen.